I'm so sorry. I am calling the meeting of the TAPS meeting to order, and we'll start with the approval of the minutes.
The minutes.
Okay, I do as well. So the minutes are approved. We'll move on to the first item, which is the fiber optics update.
Brianna, are you on?
There we go.
To share?
I'm trying to share the PowerPoint.
There we
There
go.
it is. Okay.
Whee!
So let me switch it to presentation mode. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to do this presentation. This is fiber and alternative installation options. I am Brianna Medema, Engineering Development Review Manager. We also have Haley Bush Johansson and Jacob Cox here for some support. So the agenda of what we're going to talk about today is why and where of fiber, and then walk through the permitting, current processes, and then the process improvements. And then we're going to look at what the staff has been reviewing for alternative fiber installation review, new standard developments, and then next steps. All right, so first of all, what is fiber? Fiber optic is a method of transmitting information optically. Previously, information was transmitted via electric cabling. So ultimately, this is for internet connectivity to home or to business. So fiber can transmit voice, video, and a lot of data. Fiber optics has a higher bandwidth and can support streaming. And then fiber supports internet for residents, traffic signals, and then multiple different city departments and items. So certain traffic signals are connected via fiber. Where is fiber installed? So fiber is installed within public right-of-way and in easements. And then typically companies request to install inside the city's right-of-way. So the current installation method is with primarily boring with some trenching, and the city's roadway manual has a minimum depth of 30 inches.
Hey, Brianna, if I can interrupt,
Yes.
sorry. The presentation is not advancing.
That is a problem. I apologize. Let me work on that. Let me pivot to sharing a screen instead.
Okay.
And see if that is better. Thank you for letting me know, because that is a problem. All right. Is it advancing now?
No.
No. Okay. We will try
Brianna, it's
one.
giving me the option to. So I can advance if you just want to let me know when.
Okay, this is not working. All right. Are we okay with this view? I apologize, but is this a legible view?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me know. All right, so I was trying to be on this slide, so apologies for that. So the minimum depth for fiber installations with current standards is a 30-inch. And then for new developments of arterial roadways, the city does require conduit for fiber to be installed as part of those plan sets. So would you like me to return to a previous slide on what is fiber? Or are we good to progress? Okay, great. All right, so the next one is the permitting. And we're walking through what the city has done in the last couple of years and the current process. So fiber is permitted through a master license agreement. So that's one master license with a specific company. And then individual plan sets, which are individual engineering submittals And then there is a public improvement permit, which is the permit to do the work in the right of way. So there's a couple different steps on that. Fiber applications are required to adhere to the city's code and criteria. And then one thing to note is that all fiber companies must be treated fairly and equally. And so what we do for one company must be allowed for all companies. Last year, the city processed 131 fiber folders. And those are individual engineering documents for fiber installation. And then our current year, to date, we've processed 121. And that's split into two different groups because we've had a significant process upgrade this year with a fiber portal. And so before the upgrade, we had 86, and then we've processed through 35 within the new portal. All right. So the city has a fiber standard operating procedures. These were first created and implemented in 2022, which included significant industry outreach to make sure that we had a document that would help new providers be able to come to the city and get through our process easier. So it's a document that summarizes both the process and the relevant criteria. This fiber SOP was updated both in 2023 and this year, based on cities and applicants' feedback, and then updating Aurora water standards and criteria. Some of the highlights of what has been included and upgraded in the 2020 folder, or that new process, submit into a portal. Previously, there were things that were emailed back and forth. And so now we have a little bit more accountability since we're in that portal, more traceability. With that new portal, we have an improved process. And then with that new portal, we're using and leveraging some of the technology that we have to make these reviews more efficient and faster. So those are the things that we have done for the permitting and the improvements. So one of the bigger things that we've had in the last couple of years is a request and an evaluations of new installation technologies. So in 2022, 2023, and 2024, there were multiple meetings and field visits with various fiber providers to talk about a desire to use new alternative solutions for installation. So this was with both staff and various elected officials. Of that understanding of the need, city staff secured an outside consultant to support deep research to understand what other jurisdictions are doing for installation methods, protecting roadway assets, and really what is a best practice to be flexible with supporting the needs of the evolving market. So the City of Aurora retained Roxall to provide the review and really a lot of information gathering on the different technology. One of the things that we really focused on, and this was primarily based on what we heard from the different providers, was to focus on the fiber to home or fiber to premise, and understand how this could impact the City of Aurora's infrastructure, most notably the road. The new technologies are within the roadway and how that could impact. So the different options that were looked at and the different technologies that were evaluated were trenching, directional bore or horizontal directional drill or HDD, plow or vibratory plow, micro trench, and then missile bores. And one thing to note on here is the city needs to treat all the different fiber companies equally. So if there's proprietary things, it makes it really difficult to have equal rules for all. So moving on to trenching, this is adopted by the city. This is essentially to dig a trench and expose the whole area and then put it in the bottom of the trench and cover it up. It's used in challenging locations where there's a lot of utility conflicts. And the depth for installation is 30 inches. So you dig that trench of a minimum of 30 inch for installation. Directional bore or horizontal directional drill is adopted by the city. This is primarily how fiber is installed currently within the city, and the city's minimum is that 30-inch. The image on the screen is a piece of equipment that is a vibratory plow. So that orange is the conduit, and this plow slowly drives along and sort of vibrates and cuts it in and installs the conduit. Um, the minimum depth for this would be 30 inches. But as this vibrates and cuts vertically, it really can have a negative impact on trees, sidewalks, or irrigation systems. That would be between the ground and the 30 inches. One of the things that we're looking at is under consideration for the vibratory plow technology is where this would be appropriate. This is definitely not an area that we would want, or not an installation technology we would want adjacent to mature trees or infrastructure that's in place. The next technology that we evaluated is microtrench. And this technology is under consideration. The city is working through creating details of how the city would be willing to adopt this technology. And one of the biggest concerns, since this does involve a cut to pavement, is the increase for thermal cycle damage, freeze thaw damage, some alligator cracking or differential settling. And so we're looking at different surface treatments to ensure this would be viable. The picture on the screen is a narrow mill. So this is one of the options to do a microtrench where you would mill and then you would do an overlay. So then the top visibility would be a consistent asphalt pavement all the way across. For microtrench, we are looking at it for local roadways only. So not for collector arterials. That does seem like that's the primary desire of multiple fiber companies, is to do it to that home connection. And then this one is located within the right of way or within the roadway. The next thing that we're looking at is the missile bore. This is under consideration. It would be paired with microtrench. So this would be the way to get the fiber from the roadway under the sidewalk and the curb and gutter to avoid a vertical cut. And then a larger gap that may have issues filling. So this would also be for local roadways and not available for collectors. And it would be pairing with that microtrench to get through those other city assets without damage. So what we're working on currently is developing standards of where and how each alternative could be used within the city. We are working on a sort of a list of items that need to be explored both with internal staff and external stakeholder engagement. One of these with that microtrench and the missile bore would be the location of the pole box or flower pot that would connect to each residence or each user, making sure that that location could be a viable spot that would not impact sidewalks. We're talking about different microtrenching depths and then the different surface treatments for microtrenching, that mill and overlay that I showed you a picture of, and then potentially flash fill or flow fill, depending on where we land. And there's some discussions about the timeline for when we would allow flash fill, flow fill versus the mill and overlay for a specific local roadway project. And this would be something that could be paired with the operations maintenance of roadway. Another thing we're working on is the shared use of microtrench. Different jurisdictions are requiring multiple companies to use the single microtrench location. And so we're evaluating and working to ways to require the companies to participate with each other so that we would have multiple companies in a single vault and single microtrench. So the next steps, we plan on having stakeholder meetings this fall once we have the proposed standards for evaluation and commenting. Then we'll work to see if there's any companies that are willing to pilot these new standards within the city. And then once we have those, we do need to update fiber SOP, the documentation, and some master license agreements. And then if there are any questions.
Vice Chair Bergan.
Oh, thank you. I don't have audio, so I'm on my phone. I didn't know if you knew that. I have a question on the missile bore. You said it was paired with microtrenching and that it would, I think, avoid the curb and gutter. Can you explain that again? Because I didn't quite understand how that works.
Absolutely. And there's a couple different terminology or different terms that are used for this. But this would be essentially a shallow bore that would go from the roadway underneath the curb and gutter and underneath the sidewalk. And then it would stay roughly at the same depth of that micro trench. Unfortunately, these missile bores don't have high accuracy of sort of left and right and up and down. And so there's some challenges for that. So that's what we have.
Okay. So just in terms of all these alternatives, which one is less invasive on residents' yards? Because I'm sure other members on this committee have probably had constituents reach out about their yards being ripped up and, equipment being put in wrong places and having to then, wait months to get it back to what it was supposed to look like. I actually had a constituent that I think ended up almost in litigation over it.
If it's okay, I'm going to answer that question with the opposite first and to get there.
Okay.
So the technology that is by far the worst for landscaping and irrigation or existing landscaping would be the vibratory plow. So the vibratory plow is not the solution here for minimizing fine gardening. The micro trench would be in the primary line would be in the roadway. But you would have individual drops to the residents from the front of the yard. So oftentimes right now, the impact is to the back of the yard and the utility easement. And so that is, a significant amount of construction in the back of the yard. This example or micro trenching would be in the roadway with the bores to flower pots. There would still be disturbance from those flower pots to wherever they're served, but it would be to that individual home, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to see Google Fiber do the micro trenching in I think it was Lakewood. And I was really impressed with how they, went right along the seam between the gutter and the pavement and how they, went down. They were doing probably, I don't know, Laura, you were there that day. They did like 1,500 feet in 30 minutes or something crazy like that and covered it. I thought it was really impressive and neat and clean the way they did that. They did express that the micro trench went down 12 inches and it was covered by the slurry or whatever the stuff is they put on top. But the thing that they did mention is that it was a singular drop. They couldn't have a bunch of people on top of them because if there were repairs needed, then that would be an issue. So I'm trying to understand. I don't want to force people to do things, and I want us to do things that are going to impact technology access in our communities in a positive way. And when we're looking at these other alternatives, the boring and the big trenches and the holes in the ground, to me, this micro trench seems like a smooth, clean alternative. And the fact that they are, as they expressed, companies like theirs are absorbing retrofitting or damage that could possibly take place. And to your point about the fiber pots or I don't know, what did you call it? Fiber pots. As they went into the front of the homes, they were small boxes about 500 feet apart, depending on which customer decided to utilize their service. I think this is a really good alternative to what I have been seeing. To your point, Councilmember Bergan, the disruption in the yards of the neighborhoods that I have been seeing has been really substantial. So I'm thinking that we should seriously take a hard look at this micro trenching as an alternative that the city should consider.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Brianna, for the presentation. I do have a question, and maybe I'm just not putting two together here. So in my ward, I have had some residents contact me multiple times, especially over in Mission Viejo, about quantum fiber actually starting to do work in that area. So, and there has been complaints about the yard. I have submitted numerous council request on this, and of course, staff says they can't really deal with that issue. So my question to you is, I'm trying to connect the dots here. Okay, I know we're talking about micro trenching, but for quantum fiber, what's happening with that? I'm trying to put the two together. They're doing work already in some of our in the southeast area, especially along in my ward, I know. So if we're looking for alternatives and we're talking to all of the providers, tell me how that is connected to what we're talking about here and how that will impact the residents probably even more if quantum fiber is already digging.
I don't believe quantum fiber is doing micro trenching. Is that correct, Laura?
No, but what I'm just asking, Chair, is that they're putting fiber. So I'm just trying to understand how much more impact will this be if they're already doing that in that neighborhood versus the micro trenching. I'm just trying to put the two together. What will be the significant impact because they're getting fiber done and then we're doing this micro trenching, which could impact the areas more. So if I'm addressing the question correctly, sorry.
No. I understand because I've had complaints as well with quantum fiber accessing people's backyards. And, they're very upset about it. And like you, I have received complaints as well. I think, what they're doing is a little bit different than what Google Fiber is proposing. Laura, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I just want to know, like, what would be the other impact to it? I mean, they're digging, just like what you stated, they're digging up people's yards, but then if people are impacted by the quantum fiber stuff, which could have some impacts as well, what is the real impact to these residents as ward council members or council members? We have to prepare for that.
They won't do both, though.
No.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to understand. That's really what I'm trying to understand.
That's how I understand it. It's either one or the other. They're not doing both. So quantum fiber has an established presence in some of the wards. Google Fiber wants to have presence in other wards. So never the twain shall meet, as I understand it.
Okay, well, I thank you for that. Can you just tell me if that's, Brianna, tell me if that's what the case is.
Okay, so right now for fibers that are installing, they are using one of the two installation methods that's highlighted on the screen. So they're doing trenches, which is digging, or horizontal directional drills, which is having a piece of equipment drilling a hole underground. And they can navigate it, but it's big pieces of equipment that go in the backyards, or go in. So they're really digging holes. So that's what they're currently allowed to do. And for the disturbance of existing landscaping and other items, I can pass it to either Chris or Darren, because the master license agreement identifies what they're required to do to return landscaping to existing conditions. So we do have a document that requires them to return to existing conditions. But right now they're using trenching and directional bore. And that was one of the things that we evaluated as does it need to be continued? And the answer was it is appropriate and suitable to continue, but maybe not everywhere in maybe not the least invasive to homeowners landscaping. So that's part of the reason why we looked at other things. Krista, or you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you for that explanation because I've had some residents who have gotten new landscaping or they were going to get landscaping. And the question is when is this going to happen, the impact, and are they going to return it back to the same way that they had it before? So that's been some of the concerns on that. So thank you for addressing that question.
I'm sorry, the fiber providers are required to return the grounds either existing or better than the way that they left it.
Can I ask a question on this? Okay, so I know that they're supposed to, but how do we enforce that? I know we have an agreement that they're supposed to return the landscaping back to the original, but do we specify how long it should take for them to return it? Because if they're waiting 6 months to have their landscaping redone, they're going to get in trouble by the HOA or the Metro District, for one thing. And secondly, what if it's not done to the residents' satisfaction? Who intervenes? I kind of hear like we're not supposed to get involved, but we are allowing these contractors come in, disrupt people's yards, and if they're not really adhering properly to the agreement, what is the recourse?
The second I hear of anything, I go back to the project manager directly for them to enforce it with the contractor. That's why we have certificate of insurance, and they're held liable for that.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, I've had several situations where I can't remember her name that worked in this department that had to intervene.
Leslie
I can't remember her
Gaylord.
name.
It was
Leslie Gaylord
Leslie.
had to
Mhm.
intervene, and she was like back and forth with contractors, and they were, first of all, whatever company, they hire subcontractors. Those subcontractors don't necessarily even speak English to be able to communicate with the homeowner what they're doing. But I've had those boxes literally put in the middle of someone's front yard, like by a tree, and then they had to come and remove the box, relocate it. I had another customer, they were not happy with the amount of time it took for the contractor to even really even talk to them about putting the landscape back the way it was. And then when they finally, months and months later, did the work, it was not to their satisfaction. And my customer was told, or my constituent was told, well, you're going to have to sue them.
Number one, we would go after the contractor. If the contractor didn't fix it, then we would go after the actual company. In this, for instance, Quantum is actually Lumen, which was CenturyLink.
That was Lumen. It was Lumen, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so in our agreement, do you define that the landscaping must be put back to the original within X time frame?
I don't have a time frame in there, no.
Can you add it?
I don't know if I would have to take it to legal, to be real frank with you.
Okay, because
Councilman Bergan.
if they don't
Yeah.
fix
Yeah.
it for 6 months and you end up in winter, and then they can't have it fixed till spring, I mean, you could be looking at 9 months.
Yeah, Councilman Burt, you're raising a very fair point. Let us go back and take a look at that and
Okay.
see opportunities to add some teeth in there. Yes, definitely HOAs. We've run across the issue and working with you, and let's see what we can do to make sure
Okay.
that we can ensure that that time frame is added in there.
I'll
would think-
escalate
I
that
would
with
think
legal.
they would be okay with that.
Thank you,
I
Chris.
think the contractor Lumen and them would be, okay with us having a little bit better restriction.
But also too, non-HOAs, because not everybody's home is in a HOA. So
Right,
let's
that's
consider neighborhoods
Yes.
too that are non-HOA as well. Because in my
Yep.
Mission Viejo, that neighborhood is not where I sent my complaints to city staff, which I'm kind of a little disappointed because nobody told me that was possible when one of the constituents, they were waiting to do the landscaping. And then they weren't sure when it was going to happen and how it was going. I never got this information. So I hope we do it for I hope I can get that information as well, because not everybody lives in an HOA either. So.
But actually, Councilmember Lawson, the problem with the HOA or the Metro District is they were citing the homeowner with a violation, saying your landscaping is a mess, and then they were fining them.
I know, but I'm just saying too, I understand that, but non-HOA people's yards they're putting money into their yards too. So they should be the same way, that they should be put back the same way that they occurred. So I don't disagree with you, Councilmember Bergan. I'm just saying there are a lot of non-HOA, especially in Ward 5, that are that are not in that. And they may not get fined, but they did spend time in their yard.
Right.
So it should just be a level playing field. So.
Definitely.
Councilmember Lawson, if I may, we would be agnostic. It would apply to all neighborhoods equitably across the city. And perhaps, Chair Hancock, if you're open to this, we can bring back an overview of how our license agreement works, and take an example project and kind of walk through how it's applied, what it includes, just to have that conversation here. So as you all get questions in relation to these projects, you all have information and, with our support can respond.
Thank you very much. I think that might be viable if I have the agreement of my colleagues. I'm sorry, I keep getting out of the internet, and I'm sorry for that. I was gone for a second there, but I think it might be worth the energy to bring back that information, because like Councilmember Lawson, I have been getting a lot of complaints, particularly about quantum, wrecking people's yards, or coming unannounced, or coming without the proper identification. That's been a very big issue. And also, since they hire subcontractors, it appears that sometimes those subcontractors are not up to the standard that we expect. And sometimes one woman called me the other day in a panic because the people who showed up at her door didn't even speak English. And so she didn't know what they were there for. They did not have the badges on to indicate who they were. And it was quite frightening for her as a senior to have someone just show up at her yard. So I think we kind of need to get some understanding as to what the criteria is, so that we can better explain, especially when people are upset. I think that's really important to Councilmember Lawson's point. I think it's very valid, and we should do our due diligence around that.
May I ask, is this primarily surrounded just with quantum? Are these complaints that in every single ward that you all are getting complaints just from quantum, or are there other fiber carriers that you are hearing complaints about?
Mine has been from quantum in Ward 5.
And in Ward 4, it had.
Sorry. Mine were Lumen, but there was one more company and I can't remember who it was.
Lumen is quantum.
No, but there was another company.
Okay.
Also.
Because I will address that.
If you would, that would be great, because primarily mine has been Lumen / quantum that people have really had a lot of heartburn around. So if we could address that, and there is someone that I've reached out to help with that, and she's been doing her best. But it'd be great if we had some guidelines as to what we should expect, especially when our constituents are calling us in a panic.
Absolutely. Yes, that's not acceptable.
Okay. With that said, is there anything else? And thank you for the presentation, Brianna. I really appreciate it, though I had some internet issues. I've seen these slides, so I'm very appreciative of your hard work and what you did here. Thank you very much for that information.
Thank you.
I guess we should. I'm having trouble with my technology here today. I apologize, everyone. Your hard work has not gone unnoticed. So I guess we're going to the micro mobility program update.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hancock. I'm Tom Worker Braddock with Planning and Business Development. The Shared Micromobility Program is jointly managed between Planning and Business Development and Parking and Mobility Services underneath Public Works. I want to give a shout out to my colleague Scott Bauman, Manager of Parking and Mobility Services, who really runs the day-to-day operations of this, but he's unable to be here today. Let me do a check on if my PowerPoint advances. Are people seeing the PowerPoint advance? Yes? Yep. Okay, good. Yeah. So first I want to level set on what we mean by shared micromobility. Shared micromobility is, well, shared is multiple people are intended to use these devices every day. It's not reserved exclusively for a single person. Micro, these are typically small devices, and then mobility, getting from point A to point B. The ones that we're most familiar with are e-scooters that we see in cities throughout the U.S. It did start off with pedal bikes, but we also see e-bikes, and there are probably other devices that are coming down the line. We've had a program in place since 2017 in one form or another. Last time we presented at TAPS was in 2019. So we've been getting some additional interest from other service providers recently. So we thought this was a good time to both take a new look at our regulations and rules, and at the same time give an update to TAPS and Council to make sure that they're aware about this program. We'll go over a short history of micromobility in Aurora, do a quick summary of our current program rules and regulations, discuss some draft modifications that we're looking at, and then open it up for discussions or any questions that you may have. So as I mentioned, we've had micromobility in Aurora since the fall of 2017. That's when two separate companies deployed. They deployed the pedal bikes. In 2018, one of those companies, OFO, they were the one with the yellow bikes. They actually departed the entire North American market. And then Lime, the green bikes, they departed Aurora just so that it could focus on Denver. The departure of those two companies gave us a chance to revamp the program and incorporate some lessons learned. So for instance, one common complaint that we heard at that time was devices being left in one place for extended periods of time. So with our revised program in 2019, we set a required time limit on when the entire fleet had to be redistributed after a set period of days. And then likewise, when OFO departed suddenly, they essentially abandoned all of the devices in their cities. So we also introduced a required deposit or letter of credit, so that if that happened to us again, we would have sufficient funds where we could hire a contractor and go and deal with those devices without being out of cost. We relaunched the program in 2019 as the Shared Mobility Small Devices License Program. In 2021, we had a new provider apply and begin operations, and they operated until August 2022. That operator was called Berg. This is their rental history for their time period. You can see in June 2021, they had over 3,000 rentals on their devices just in Aurora. We saw that decrease through the winter, which we expected, and then start to increase into the spring of 2022. But I think that's when they began contracting the operations throughout the region, and then they pulled out in August 2022. I will note that throughout this period, we the city really only fielded about 5 complaints from residents and users of the city. 2 of those were related to commercial property managers that didn't want devices operating on the properties that they manage. So we actually drew a geofence around those locations so devices wouldn't be able to be operated in those areas. And then the other 3 complaints were just devices that were parked incorrectly or located in the wrong place. So we notified the operator, and the operator was able to address those in a matter of hours. But really, unlike the previous iteration of mobility devices, with these e-devices, we had very few concerns from residents. And that's primarily related to the fact that in order for these companies to make money with e-devices, they actively have to be out there recharging the devices so that they're available to potential users. Our current program rules has several components. Safety requirements, so minimum number of lights, a maximum top speed, service area requirements. We really wanted to make these devices available to people using light rail, so they're required to be in areas around light rail stations. Requirements on how to properly park the vehicles. Operational requirements, we require a local contact person to be available in the Denver metro area. We have requirements on the fleet size, the amount of vehicles that can be deployed, and the number of operators that we can control. Requirements on community engagement, reporting requirements. We require these operators report data to us, not only to us on a monthly basis, but also to a third party that we can designate. So they're also reporting to Dr. Cog, who set up a regional data collaboration, and then fee requirements. The modifications we're considering at this moment is reducing the number of initial devices that can be deployed. Right now, a operator can deploy up to 500 devices right out the gate. We would reduce that maximum to 300. That would also come with restructuring the fleet sizes, the variety of fleet sizes we would have. We would increase the infrastructure fee. Right now, the city is receiving 3 cents per rental. We would increase that to 5 cents per rental. And then we would lower the operator reserve amount that I mentioned. Right now it's $25,000. We would reduce that to $15,000. And we feel like that would still provide sufficient capital. Should an operator suddenly leave the city, we can still go and collect those devices. And so that's my presentation. With that, I'll ask, does the committee support moving forward this program update to the next available study session for informational purposes? I'm also available to answer any questions you may have. Councilmember Bergan?
Thank you. Yeah. I guess it seems like this program is not working for Aurora because the fact that we're not I don't know why it's echoing, but the fact that we're not urban like Denver, very concentrated with a lot of businesses where people would utilize these. Is that really what it came down to? Because I know you said you're reducing the fees for the reserve and the rental amount and so forth, but it just seems like it's actually a program that's not conducive to a city like ours with 164 square, acres of land and not really a concentrated area. Or are you looking at specific areas of town?
Well, the only required areas or the only areas of town that we would require operators to be in is within 2 miles of any light rail station. And that's really so these devices are available for people to use to get to transit. If the mobility operator wants to deploy in other parts of town, they can. But from what we've seen, when, for instance, Bird came in, they really focus on the areas of town, generally around central Aurora and northwest Aurora. Didn't really see them deploy out into the other areas. But you're right, we do have a different type of land use than a place like Denver or downtown Denver. But we've also seen where, because of our land use, where there may be long distances between the grocery store and the apartment complex or light rail and the jobs. There is, when these devices are available, people do use them.
Okay, well, I guess that was the crux of my question, because it looked like people weren't using them because they literally, all these companies have left us because of that graph you showed where usage was started high. Maybe, I don't know if it was just like the novelty of it, and then it dropped down.
Yeah, I would also say that in this general industry, there's been a lot of churn. So, for instance, Bird, the operator that was here from August 2020 or from May 2021 to August 2022, after they left Aurora, they ceased operations as a company approximately 6 months later. So now what it seems like is the amount of operators that are available has settled down into a smaller amount. And so those operators seem to be a bit more consistent and a bit more fiscally secure. We believe that the way we structure this program is, again, recognizing that we're not, we don't have a land use like Denver or the central business district of Denver. So we have different requirements. We don't require as many devices to be placed in our city. Our rental fee is lower. So that way, if a provider does see a market opportunity to serve Aurora, we try to make it as attractive as possible. And as I mentioned, we have been approached by a few different providers in the last 6 months to come into Aurora.
Yeah, Tom, if I can just add to that, each provider essentially submits an application to the city that cites an area and a business plan around that. And so it is driven by the market. And with that, that's actually why we wanted to make sure we brought this back to council, because it's been quite some time since council has discussed this program. And we want to make sure council A is aware that there's growing interest from these providers of coming back into the city, and B, the comfort level of the program, the revisions that are being proposed, and continuing to move forward to allow these providers to come in.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Yes, Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Councilmember Hancock. So I understand that, mobility is really important, and it's really important to have different types. Here's my concern. So these are going to be near light rail stations, but as between me, I'm just giving an example, between myself and Councilmember Hancock, we are between a light rail station. And what I'm afraid of is, number one, is these things just being left between our wards, just kind of left. And then here we go. I'm going to have to do council request because it's going to be left around, and you can say no, but it will be. They will be around in our ears because we're near, her and I are right next door to light rail. And they are going to be I can guarantee you, they're going to be all over the place. And then I'm going to have to do council requests. So I understand it's good for the providers to come and to do this, but we got to think about a couple things when we're looking at wards and how we're going to deal with this. And what is the city going to do when we have to do a council request to say, hey, we need these to be moved because we're going to get complaints from constituents. So that's one of my concerns. I'm not against mobility, but I've seen this in Denver all the time. And these things are left everywhere. They're completely left everywhere. Number two, my third point is riding within the vicinity. Let's use 9 Mile. Very dangerous in general, just with location and just people rolling with these things throughout that part of the city. That's another one of my concerns with these as well. So more so than I understand the operators want to do this, my concern, especially as a ward council member, is these things being left because we are near light rail stations and they could be left anywhere in the city. And if you remember, Councilmember Bergan, I remember when we had these e-bikes, someone made like a design because they left all the bikes behind someone's fences. So I think there's some things that we also need to consider about how we're going to deal with these when they have something in place, how we're going to deal with these things when they're left, because you can't just say everybody's going to follow the rules because they're not. So that's my my comments and my concerns. I really didn't have any questions.
I guess I'm point, I would ask at this point, is this even worth us moving forward to study session to have us discuss it in more detail? Because the appetite seems to be that folks kind of want this because Denver's got it. Well, not that that's a shining example, but for people with mobility wanting to get from the light rail station to the bus station or wherever they want to go throughout the city without necessarily having to take, bus or train transportation. Is it something that we have an appetite for that we want to consider bringing to study session? Comment?
I'm fine with bringing it to study session because I'm just one council member, but I also think, as I said, Chair Hancock, these things also need to be kind of dwelled out. And I would hope that the city staff would have an answer to those type of questions. So again, I'm not against it, but we also need to think about some of the things that come along with this and how we as council members deal with it. So I'm not against it and I'm fine with moving it forward. And I understand the mobility issue, but we also got to think about some of the other things which I like to be proactive about.
And I am in total agreement with that, Member Lawson. To your point, I don't want to see these vehicles just tossed all over neighborhoods, left in the park, those kind of things. We got to figure out what is the operator going to do to make sure that these are, addressed and that they're not going to be, like shopping carts all over the place, found in the lake or, in ridiculous places that we don't want them to be. So I would encourage staff to, and if you haven't already done that, to really flesh that out so that we can understand how these things are going to be managed.
Yeah, I'm fine with it going to study session. I agree with everybody. And Councilmember Hancock, you might have to do a let's seize the scooters ordinance. Just kidding.
Oh no, I don't want to do that.
Chair Hancock, if I may.
The thing is, I'm sorry, Laura, I like the idea of the scooters. I do, especially when people want to get from point A to point B. But to your point, Councilmember Lawson, what are we going to do with these people once they're with these devices, once they're done with them? Are they just going to, I've seen them just carelessly thrown on the sidewalk, so that's definitely a valid consideration.
Chair Hancock, if I may, wonderful questions. These are the right questions. And we have asked several providers we've been in conversations with about, well, are these left in front of residential homes? What does this look like? Talk us through the technology on your side, the 24/7 support around this. So we've gotten some answers to that and would be happy to incorporate that as part of this presentation when it goes to study session to provide the information that we've learned to date.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love that. So if there are no, Tom, was there something you want to add?
Oh, I just wanted to mention some of the tools that we already utilized to address some of the concerns that Councilmember Lawson had. One is, as part of our existing requirements, we require a local phone number to be placed on each device, so that if some resident that's not very familiar with smartphones, doesn't have an account with these providers, does have a concern with one of these scooters, there is a phone number on each of the devices where they could call and request that it be addressed. And then within the rules and regulations, we do have pretty specific requirements about if there is a request for it to be moved, how long does the provider have to move it? And then not only do we have those requirements, but we have it spelled out in the rules and regulations of if this doesn't happen, what options does the city have to find the provider? What options does the city have to elevate this to the provider's attention? And then if it's not working, the city and the rules and regulations does have the operation to require that provider to cease operations and pull out from the city. But these are good points that we can address at the study session.
Okay, and just my last point, Tom, I appreciate that. And that's the reality, and that's a perfect world. But when it comes to these scooters just coming, I'm just saying they're going to come from residents see them. you're not going to stop on the side of Parker Road right there, for example, and be able to have time to look at a phone number. Who they're going to call? Councilmember Lawson, Councilmember Hancock, Councilmember Bergan. Hey, these things are here. So you got to kind of look at, that's the perfect world, but that's not going to be the total reality. So that's why flushing this out a little bit is really important. So I appreciate what you're saying, but there are some reality points that don't go along with exactly what the ideal of what people would or should do. Because a lot of people aren't going to do it. They're going to call us and say, hey, these scooters are here and we need to be removed or something like that. So I'm just saying that from a council member's perspective.
Yep, good point.
And that is exactly why we are bringing this to council, to get feedback and have this conversation to make sure that, you know, you all would like this to continue to move forward.
And I appreciate the effort. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to the other input of the other council members as well. Because there's always, when we have minds coming together, there are things we hadn't thought of and things we need to consider. Because it might sound like a good idea on the surface, but then when the rubber meets the road, there's a whole lot of other unintended consequences that will occur as a result of that. So we just want to be good stewards of that. We don't want this to be a debacle. We do want it to be a success. So thank you, Tom. Appreciate your time very much.
Great, thank you.
All righty. We just have two other things to hop on real quick. The DOLA local match program application. Who is doing? Oh, I guess that would be Christina, or is that you, Laura?
Councilmember, I can take. Oh,
Christina's on.
Christina, do you want to take this one or you'd like me to?
Laura, if you'd like to get started, I can jump in if needed.
All right. So, council members, the Department of Local Affairs, very early on when the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act came out, set aside funding to support local governments to offset local match requirements for grant applications for IIJA discretionary grant opportunities. We've been in conversation with the Department of Local Affairs over the last couple of years regarding our capital improvement master plan and our priority transportation projects for IIJA funds. And as previously discussed at the spring workshop, we have several projects that are great matches for major investment programs. So the IIJA, one of those is the Peoria Bridge over Sand Creek Replacement Project. That's the oldest bridge we have in the city. And we are seeking to submit an application to the Bridge Investment Program, which is due November 1st. To offset our local match requirements. So we love, as you all know, to garner other people's money to offset our requirements. We're seeking to submit an application to DOLA for $1.5 million to help support our local match requirements for that application. The requirement in doing that is a resolution from City Council, just expressing their support for the program and, of course, the project. And so because of the timeline for the grant application and to ensure that we can know if we've received the funds from DOLA in time to include them for the application, we're seeking to bring this here, and then with Councilmember Hancock's support, bring that straight to the regular council meeting on Monday to have council formally vote on that resolution so we can quickly turn that around to DOLA and then receive a response from them as to whether we received an award within 30 days. And that gives us just enough time to get to get it included in our grant application. Christina, did I miss anything?
That was great, Laura.
Okay.
Thanks.
So today we're just looking for council's endorsement to continue to move forward on this and have our resolution approved to go forward into DOLA with our application for $1.5 million for the Peoria Bridge.
And so, council members, what is your pleasure?
Sounds good.
I approve.
Yes. All right, I approve too.
Thank you.
Let's go get people's money. Fantastic. And the final thing on our agenda today is the 24-25 snow and ice control plan presentation. And that will be Michelle Gardner, Senior Assistant City Manager, or is that you again, Laura?
That's going to be Mr. Mark Tamburo.
Oh, Mark. Okay. That's not the name I have on here, but go ahead, Mark.
Okay, good afternoon, council members. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
It's
Okay.
not in presentation though, Mark. There you go. Maybe.
It's thinking about it. How about now?
Yeah.
Good? Okay, so it's 80 degrees in Aurora, so who's excited to talk about snow? This is this is going to be informational only. I would like to recognize Heath Walter, the street project manager. He was on the hook for the presentation, but he is in Texas enjoying his first grandson. So congrats to him, but he did a lot of work on this. So I did want to recognize him for sure. So small agenda here. We're going to talk about 23-24 snow summary, 24-25 snow and ice control plan, some minor changes there. We're going to mention the residential snow plowing option, talk about our weather forecasting tools, and lastly, any questions that anyone has, I'm happy to answer at the end. So I just want to review the city's snow and ice control plan. The goal is public safety, and it's designed to ensure that the city's emergency services remain functioning at all times during a snow event. The city does provide snow removal equipment and staffing based on the most common types of winter storms that occur in our area, and we're going to cover those. And we have more than 90 pieces of snow removal equipment. So our plan focuses on arterial and collector streets, and then secondary and residential through streets, and then of course our rural and outlying streets. We do use different materials to fight snow throughout the winter. We have liquid and granule de-icer and anti-icing materials, and we use them in tandem with our equipment to clear the streets. So this slide shows the different categories of storms 1 through 4 with the applicable inches of snow that we use to make those categories. And then in the middle, it shows the kind of the historic outlook over the years. And so you can see that primarily in Aurora, we deal with category 1 and 2 storms. And infrequently, we deal with category 4 storms that are more than 12 inches. For 23-24, we had 9 category 1s, 2 category 2s, 5 category 3s, and we had no category 4s, which was a good thing. Here is a depiction of kind of our plows and how they're positioned on the roadway. So we prefer to plow in a formation, especially when we have multiple plows per route, and ideally, we do our best to keep the citizens safe. We have signs in the back of our trucks telling them to stay back from the plows. And, you know, inevitably our operators are watching out for folks that like to weave in and out. So very dangerous work, but for the most part, the public does a pretty good job complying. So this slide here, again, shows our priority routes, red, blue, green, and yellow, and you'll see the lane miles. And it's important to note that we do work each year with public improvement inspections, and we are able to obtain all the information on the streets that were built in Aurora, that are out of warranty, that we are going to be responsible for during our upcoming snow season. So we've already done that. So these 926, 387, 306, and 30 are the updated numbers. And on the right-hand side, again, just to highlight storms since 94, you'll see that primarily we deal with category 1 and 2 storms. And then very infrequently, we deal with the category 4 storms. Ward map on the left just shows how things are broken down in the city. And on the right-hand side is an example of our South number 7 route map. We do have multiple wards that will cross one particular route. Of importance to note is we have 8 snow routes to the north, which includes Mississippi to the north, and then south of Mississippi, we actually have 9 snow routes. This is just a picture of our kind of our material storage. Upper left-hand corner, we do have to keep our solid de-icing materials, which is called ice slicer. We do have to keep that covered. You'll see the silos in the middle upper portion of your screen there. That is a de-icing / anti-icing material called Apex. Down at the South Satellite, we use a very similar material called torch, and we simply have two different types of materials just so that we have redundancy in case one of our suppliers has an issue getting us the products that we may need. And on the lower right, we still do have dedicated tanker routes, and so those trucks have the ability to plow, but we'll often send those out before the snow actually begins to fly so we can get the roads pre-treated. And kind of on that note, it's important to note that the liquid materials that we put down, it's very important as to when we put those down. We can't put them down too early, and they're kind of temperature dependent, and it also is dependent on the snow falling on top of that material relatively quickly, because that material in and of itself can actually be slick when applied to pavement if we don't get snow shortly thereafter. It's primarily to prevent snow from building up on the asphalt, and that way when we plow it, we can get it plowed down to the asphalt surface, and so it kind of prevents the buildup. Just another look at our equipment. Typical tandem axle plow truck on the left. Snow blower loader attachments are super helpful, especially out northeast where there's a lot of blowing and drifting due to the lack of development. And of course, towards the center, we have quite a number of tandem axle plows. This slide just kind of gives you a good indication of the amount of lane miles that we have to plow. You can see the breakdown again of the red, blue, green, and yellow. And it's the equivalent of driving out to St. Charles, Missouri and back. So on a 2-lane blacktop. So it's quite a bit that we have to maintain during these events. This slide just kind of shows and kind of gives a shout out to our sister departments, Aurora Water and Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. They provide staff and equipment, and we really can't do this job without them. We just wrapped up the annual snow rodeo where we have everyone come out for training, showcase their talents. We have people that we're sending to regionals up in Loveland next week. So it was a very good event, and it's just a good spirit of cooperation and a good networking opportunity for folks to kind of come out and meet one another and kind of get familiar with what we're doing for this upcoming snow season.
And can I just add in, Mark, that it was
Yes.
really exciting because Public Works was actually the top 3 on the tandem driving. So we have 3 different teams going up to Loveland, and 2 of them include women. So it's pretty exciting. It's just, we have a lot of good women out there working along with our men. So it's a pretty neat opportunity for them.
Agreed. Yeah, it was a great event. So this slide just kind of highlights, we talk about sidewalk snow removal. This comes up each year. And so it's important to note that our staffing levels continue to be limited, for primary snow responsibility. And we rely on the internal resources, like I mentioned, of pros and Aurora Water. Honestly, for a category 2 event or larger is when we're calling those other departments in. So in Public Works streets, we can staff a category 1 storm by ourselves. Beyond that, we have to call in on our sister departments. So that being said, sidewalk snow removal is not part of our snow and ice control plan. And I'll refer to that city code 126-312, which places that responsibility on the adjacent property owner to remove snow and ice from their sidewalks. That being said, it is a possibility during a category 3 or 4 event that we may inadvertently place snow from the roadway on the sidewalk because simply there's no place to put it, and it's inevitable that may happen. And when that happens, we go out and we remove snow from the arterial sidewalks only. We do that during regular shifts. We don't do that on overtime, just in order to maintain fiscal responsibility with our snow budget. Another service that we provide throughout the winter is ice cutting. And I do want to note that very few municipalities offer this service. It's very hard on the equipment. It can damage some of our assets. We have some really good operators, as Cindy mentioned, with the snow rodeo, with both women and men, that fortunately can remove the snow and ice and not damage our assets. And so it's a pretty big deal. The requests come in, through Access Aurora. These are typically north-facing streets. Our supervisors are constantly patrolling the areas, creating alternate lists on their own so that they can dispatch equipment and personnel out to those areas. And again, it's completed during regular shifts because it's not our primary function associated with the snow and ice control plan. And in 23-24, we completed 923,326 linear feet, equating to 175 miles of ice cutting, which is quite a bit. So with that, I got to thinking about all these ice complaints that roll in and decided to work with our GIS team to create a tracking map. This is still in progress, so to speak. And so I'm working with Nicholas Andrus to make some tweaks on this, but this will improve our ability to monitor repeat requests depending on the storm severity, location, wind speed, and surface temperature. So essentially, when you are live on this map, it is both a heat map and a cluster map, and it also categorizes a date range as well. So you can see the numbers in the blue circles as you, this is not a live map, obviously. If it were, as you drill down, you can actually see the complaints per residence. So you'll see that, you know, this individual on the corner always puts in a ticket. And so that'll just help us to further define where our trouble spot areas are. And in the instance of having to hire a contractor, this will be extremely valuable for us because we can, you know, really paint a picture of where, you know, the contractors need to go to really benefit the citizens the most and provide the highest quality service level, you know, as far as removing snow and ice. No two storms are the same. I think we all know that. We live in Colorado. You know, if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes, right? Total snow and ice requests since 2013, 11,687. And these come in 3 different manners: shoveling, ice, or other snow and ice. And that could be anything from, you know, literally ice on that north-facing area that needs to be cut to, hey, you plowed in the end of my driveway, or possibly, hey, you put snow on my sidewalk. So they come in 3 different categories. And on the right, it shows 3,460 complaints between 21 and 23, for example. And then the district HOA plowing, just a little history on this. Following the bomb cyclone in March 2019, we began to explore the process of allowing special districts and established HOAs to plow public residential streets within their boundaries. There was a pilot program developed for High Plains Metro District via an IGA, and that was approved in 21, expired in 22, and that serviced primarily the Blackstone neighborhood. In 23, City Council approved a resolution R23-106, sponsored by Councilmember Bergan, allowing formal HOAs and special districts to provide snow removal on residential streets within their boundaries, and they have to enter into the IGA with the city. So operations developed a snow and ice control plan template, which is a scaled down version of our own snow and ice control plan, along with an IGA to allow the special districts to plow within their boundaries. And we did send out notices on the 10th of September about this program, again, per the request of Councilmember Bergan. And so basically how that works is the HOA or Metro districts request an application process essentially through me. So I send them an application and I send them our snow removal plan template, which essentially they need to include contractor information. I believe there's insurance requirements along with that are looked at by legal, and the type of equipment they're using, the type of products that they're putting down. They have to identify snow dump areas and things of that nature. And then those 2 documents come back and they're reviewed by the city attorney. And essentially, we have the permission to bring it to a regular council meeting and get that approved. So HOA and Metro districts have to report when their contracted services have been deployed. So we currently have Blackstone and South Shore taking advantage of this. And so they email me monthly and I keep a log of if they went out and how much they plowed, what kind of material, how much material they put down, so on and so forth. So as you might imagine, we look at forecasts all the time throughout the winter. We utilize, as you can see here, several different folks for our technology or for our forecasting. Skyview Weather and DTN are the two big ones that I use. We've noticed that some are more accurate certain years than others. DTN is very important to us because it shows the surface, road, and bridge temperatures, which again helps me determine when we want to start doing the pre-treatment on our trouble spots, bridges, intersections, and things of that nature. So it's not a perfect science, but we do have a lot of tools at our disposal to try and get a really good, accurate portrayal of what the storm's going to do. Everyone always likes the Farmer's Almanac, so they're talking cold average snowfall for us this year. And then NOAA is talking about a La Nina pattern expected to dominate. The South's going to see the warmer, drier conditions, and North tends to be wetter and colder. That being said, I mean, we do live in a high desert in Colorado. A lot of our storms can be dry, but when the spring storms come, as everyone knows, they have a tremendous amount of water content to them. So again, no two storms are the same, and we really have to make on-the-fly adjustments during our storms, depending upon how the storm originates, north versus south, the winds, again, the air temperature and the surface temperature of the roadway and the bridge. It all kind of plays into our staffing levels, both north and south side of town. They can be different north or south staffing levels can, depending on the storm. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And does the policy committee support the 24-25 snow and ice control plan informational presentation moving forward to the next available study session?
I see Councilmember Bergan, you have your hand up.
Go ahead, Councilmember Bergan.
Thank you. Who's echoing? Is it me?
There's a pretty bad echo.
Try without speaker. Thank you for the presentation. It's always interesting to me. Just quickly on, obviously down in Southeast Aurora, higher elevation at 61, 6,200 feet. So when you said category 2, I think you only had like 2 storms. Is that an average of the whole city, or do you delineate that?
It is. That's a great question. Thanks for the question. So we do, I do categorize the storm, I should say, based on the whole city. But to your point, and that's why I brought up the point about staffing levels can be different south versus north. So the higher elevation area you speak about, we oftentimes will have what we call a category 2 storm with extras. Those extras would be those sister departments helping us out. And essentially what that means is we'll put an extra plow truck or so on each of those routes, because we know that the intensity of the storm, the rate of the snowfall can be higher in those areas. So in an effort to keep up with that, we vary the staffing levels, and vice versa. Sometimes it's just the opposite, Councilmember Bergan. Yeah. Sometimes it's northeast, where we have a ton of wind and there's not much going on in that higher elevation area. And so in order to maintain fiscal responsibility, we'll kind of flip-flop those resources.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions?
Any other questions? Great presentation, Mark. Thank you so much. And
you're very welcome.
Are we okay with moving this to study or for presentations and study session? All right. Yes. So moved. Let's go. Fantastic. No, I hope we have plenty of snow in the mountains.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that sounds good to me.
And I appreciate that. You're prepared for whatever comes, and I really appreciate that. So,
yes, ma'am.
I guess that completes everything today. Any miscellaneous matters for consideration, Laura?
None from staff today.
Anything? None from staff today? Okay. Anticipated topics for next meeting then.
Yes, we have a full lineup for next month.
Yes, I know.
So we're going to have a Connecting Aurora update. We have several IGAs coming forward, an IGA with Aurora Public Schools for a turn island at Vista Peak High School, an IGA with Arapahoe County for a traffic signal at Piccadilly and Plains, an IGA with Arapahoe and Elbert counties for county line maintenance, and an IGA with E470 for 64th for maintenance and operations. We also will have a short update on the PROS Older Adults Transportation Micromobility Program, for which we just received an RTD grant. We're hoping to bring that IGA forward to council for approval very quickly. We'll have a quick update on the 9 Mile pedestrian bridge. And then last, and that would be possibly the last item.
Fantastic. So we've got some meaty topics coming up at our next meeting on October 17th. And hopefully I won't be having any technical difficulties at the next meeting. Lord help me. And we'll be able to do this thing. And I appreciate everybody's time and attention and your work. Thank you so much. If there's nothing else, then I will give you back the rest of your day.
I hope
Thanks
I can figure out how to get audio.
Me too.
Good luck.
Bye-bye now.